There were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range.
For decades, Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth showed unwavering support and love for each other. However, after 70 years of marriage, Prince Philip made a shocking decision. He no longer wanted to live with the Queen. This unexpected move left the public wondering what went wrong. Was this decision personal, or was there more to the story? For years, the truth remained a mystery. But in a surprising revelation, Princess Anne, alongside King Charles and Prince Andrew, has finally revealed the real reason behind their father's departure. Stay tuned as we uncover the untold story of why Prince Philip didn't live with the Queen in Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne just revealed why Prince Philip didn't live with the Queen. Princess Anne, the only daughter of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, has left people stunned with her revelation. For years, there have been different speculations about why Prince Philip chose to leave Buckingham Palace and not live with the Queen in his final years. But now, the truth is finally out. Princess Anne, often called her father's favorite, has shared the real reason behind her father's decision, and her brothers, Prince Charles and Prince Andrew, have supported her claims. Stay tuned as we uncover the full story. Unlike the formal and distant relationship often seen in royal families, Princess Anne and her father, Prince Philip, shared a close bond. She was known as her father's girl, likely because of their similar traits of being outspoken, abrasive, stubborn, strong-willed, and sarcastic, and with a sharp sense of humor, which was often at the expense of others. They both enjoyed suffering fools and had little patience with those who didn't understand things as quickly as they did. But what stood out was their unwavering loyalty. Neither Prince Philip nor Princess Anne could see wrong in the other. Instead, they playfully criticize each other while maintaining deep respect. Over the years, Princess Anne witnessed what was happening between her parents, while her brothers were often preoccupied with their royal duties. Anne knew the truth and saw firsthand what lay behind the perfect smiles and perfect royal couple her parents presented to the world. But that's not all. Prince Philip also confided in his daughter about some of the challenges he faced in his marriage to Queen Elizabeth. However, to truly understand the reason why Prince Philip chose to move away, we need to go back to the beginning, when it all started, even before Princess Anne and her brothers were born. Queen Elizabeth, formerly Princess Elizabeth, first met Prince Philip, an exiled Greek prince, at a wedding in 1934. He was 13 and she was just 8 years old. However, there was no spark between them until 5 years later they met again. At this time, Princess Elizabeth was 13 and Prince Philip was 18. However, the princess wasn't alone. Her parents and sister were on a visit to the Britannia Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, Devon. They were meant to meet with some of the cadets, and Philip was one of them. But things didn't go as planned due to an outbreak of mumps and chickenpox during the visit. Instead of attending a chapel service like they were supposed to, they spent time in the headmaster's house, and Prince Philip came to entertain the young princesses. He was one of those who weren't infected by the virus. Eventually, Philip got tired of sitting inside the house and asked the princesses to come outside. Instead, he began playing croquet, jumping over tennis nets, and displaying a carefree, athletic spirit. This caught Princess Elizabeth's attention, and from that moment, she fell in love. She later claimed that she never had eyes for anyone else after that day. After this encounter, the princess developed a strong teenage crush on Philip and began exchanging letters with him while he was serving with the Royal Navy during the war years. Elizabeth even kept a picture of him in her bedroom as a sign of admiration. By 1946, Philip returned from the Pacific Theater and his relationship with Princess Elizabeth blossomed. In June, he proposed to her on the grounds of Balmoral. In a letter dated back to 1946, he wrote, To have been spared in the war and seen victory, to have been given the chance to rest and to readjust myself, to have fallen in love completely and unreservedly, makes all one's personal and even the world's troubles seem small and petty. However, despite the proposal, Queen Elizabeth's father, King George VI, was reluctant about a marriage between them. He feared Elizabeth was too young and settling for the first man she met. Perhaps she would meet someone else and change her mind about Philip. Because of this, the royal family remained quiet about Philip's intention to marry Elizabeth. Additionally, there was some resistance to Philip's proposal within the royal family. Despite Philip being of royal lineage and direct descendants of Queen Victoria, making him and Elizabeth third cousins, many saw Philip to be too brusque, too unpolished, too German, too Greek, too un-English to marry Princess Elizabeth. But Elizabeth was insistent. She had made up her mind about Philip and was determined to marry him. It wasn't until a year later, in July 1947, after Elizabeth's 21st birthday, that a formal announcement was made on their engagement. Ahead of his marriage to Elizabeth, Philip had to renounce his Danish and Greek royal titles and become a member of the Church of England. Philip did this without hesitation because of his love for Elizabeth. Though he had been baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church, the Archbishop of Canterbury formally received Philip into the Church of England on October 3, 1947. He also adopted a new anglicized last name, Mountbatten. On November 20, 1947, Princess Elizabeth married Philip in Westminster Abbey in London. They later went for their honeymoon at the Broadlands in Hampshire, England, the home of Philip's uncle, Earl Mountbatten. But little did Philip know that his life was about to change in ways he never imagined. After the wedding, Prince Philip continued serving in the Navy, rapidly progressing through the ranks. A year later, they had their first son, Charles, followed by their daughter, Anne. Philip's naval career flourished, and he was eventually posted to Malta. Princess Elizabeth traveled to be with him while the kids stayed back in England. They enjoyed a relatively normal life for a short while. But everything in their lives was about to take a new turn. In 1952, King George fell ill and died. This was just 5 years after their marriage. Elizabeth and Philip's world turned upside down. Elizabeth, who was just 25 years old, was now the queen, and Philip, who was 30 years old, had to adjust to a new reality. They had thought they would have more time to live their own lives and enjoy themselves before Elizabeth ascended the throne. But fate had other plans. Now Elizabeth was going to become queen while her husband Philip, what was he to become? Not a king, but someone who would remain in the shadows of his wife, Queen Elizabeth. Although this was known all along, this was going to affect their whole relationship. Elizabeth's succession meant he had to give up any ambitions he might have had within the Royal Navy. For a man used to commanding ships, suddenly being relegated to a supporting role could not have been easy. And let's not forget, this was the 1950s, a time when it was extremely rare for a husband to be outranked and controlled by his wife. This was even more challenging for Philip, as his wife was the #1 citizen, which meant duty came first before family. This marked the beginning of a lifelong struggle for Philip, one that would eventually influence his decision to live apart from the Queen in his later years. But how did it happen? Stick around to find out. The challenges of royal life. Elizabeth and Philip were on a safari trip to Kenya when Philip informed her of her father's demise. Elizabeth knew what was expected of her, and they immediately headed back to the UK. Upon their arrival, Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II. But Philip's title remained unchanged. He wasn't named King Consort. Instead, he was given the title of Royal Consort. Regardless, Prince Philip showed unwavering support to his wife, leaving his career in the Royal Navy to serve the monarchy. But this was just the first of many changes. Next, they moved from their old residence, Clarence House, to Buckingham Palace. On June 2, 1953, a year after Queen Elizabeth had ascended to the throne. Her coronation took place at Westminster Abbey, London. After the Archbishop of Canterbury, Philip was the first to kneel in front of the new monarch, pledging to be her liegeman for life. But was he truly able to be this? It was easier said than done for a man to live under a woman's authority, leaving behind his aspirations and dreams to support Queen Elizabeth II. Philip also had to adjust to walking a few steps behind his wife in public instead of beside her. He later revealed that he thought he was going to have a long career in the Navy, but it soon became obvious that there was no hope, and he had to compromise. Philip accepted his new reality and tried to make the best of it. However, early conflicts arose between Elizabeth and Philip after she became queen. One of the most notable disputes happened when Philip's uncle, Louis Ducky Mountbatten, declared, "The House of Mountbatten now reigns in England." This implied that since Queen Elizabeth was married, her royal children would bear her husband's surname. However, Elizabeth's grandmother, Queen Mary, and Prime Minister Winston Churchill did not agree to this. They insisted Queen Elizabeth and her descendants would continue under the House of Windsor, maintaining her father's legacy. Philip was deeply offended by this decision and said he was nothing but a bloody amoeba, and the only man in the country who wasn't allowed to pass his name to his children. His words expressed his frustration and struggle to establish his identity within the monarchy and the challenges that lay ahead. When Queen Elizabeth heard her husband's words, she decided to make some changes, breaking long-standing tradition. In February 1960, she announced that her descendants would bear the surname Mountbatten-Windsor, a combination of her and Prince Philip's surnames. While Elizabeth was the head of the monarchy, Prince Philip took on the role of royal consort, but his role wasn't clearly defined. He once told Geix Brandreth that he was often perceived as a refugee husband. Despite his effort to make the best of his position, he struggled to crave a meaningful role for himself within an institution centered on his wife, leaving him in the shadows. Prince Philip described his experience as royal consort as one of trial and error. Although he wasn't the first royal consort in history, he was faced with challenges with no clear precedent to follow. Prince Philip also admitted that when he asked what was expected of him as royal consort, people had no real answer and simply looked blank. However, one thing was clear to Philip: his first duty was to serve his wife, Queen Elizabeth, in the best way he could. This was in contrast to Prince Philip's dynamic, driven, and outspoken personality, much like his daughter, Princess Anne. But he carried it out with utter devotion. In his first years, Prince Philip focused on modernizing the monarchy, fearing it could become a museum piece. But this wasn't without struggles, as he faced resistance from the old guard, who wanted to maintain tradition. But Philip didn't black out with his ideas, and this resulted in significant success. He proposed broadcasting the coronations of Elizabeth II on live television, declaring it would be unfit for the ceremony to be presented as if it were a theatrical performance. More than 20 million people tuned into the televised ceremony, proving his foresight. This was the first time that the monarchy had been slightly visible to the public. Philip also became the first royal family member to sit for a television interview, and after about a decade, they invited cameras into their homes, offering the opportunity to film a behind-the-scenes documentary. But that's not all. Philip encouraged Elizabeth to end the outdated practice of presenting debutantes at court and introduced informal lunches and garden parties to engage a broader swath of the British public. He took steps to reorganize and renovate the royal estates and generally sought to make the royal household and the monarchy less rigid so as not to have so much formality everywhere. Prince Philip had so much time to himself, with fewer official duties, that he explored his interests, and by the 1980s, he had written 9 books. He also encouraged Elizabeth in 1957 to televise her annual Christmas messages, taught her how to use a teleprompter, and was the first member of the royal to use a computer, even writing his emails and speeches. Prince Philip was a man of great curiosity. Queen Elizabeth did her best to include Philip in her public speeches, often saying, "My husband and I," which became a national joke, but Philip was not just a figurehead. Despite the challenges the crown brought along, they accommodated it together. In family matters, Elizabeth allowed him to take the lead, but in state matters, he had no real say. However, there were moments when he treated her as an ordinary wife, even in public. For instance, while Prince Philip was driving Elizabeth to Cowdray Park, his excessive speed made the Queen tense and draw in breath at critical moments. Eventually, Prince Philip exploded, saying if she did it again, he would put her out of the car. Although being queen, she composed herself and didn't protest. However, there were moments when she asserted her authority, even in front of her staff. Sometimes she yelled at him to shut up, which often led him to leave the room in frustration. Like any couple, they had their ups and downs. However, one thing was often linked to Prince Philip: infidelity. Rumors circulated that he was unfaithful, mainly due to his naturally flirtatious manner, which made him the center of gossip. His involvement in activities like his Gentleman's Lunch Club and his tours on the Royal Yacht Britannia in the 1950s led to speculation about possible affairs. Over the years, he was linked to multiple women, including a Russian ballerina, an English stage actor, and a writer. But none of these alleged affairs were ever confirmed. At one point, the Baltimore Sun published a story claiming that Philip was romantically involved with an unnamed woman he met regularly in the West End apartment. The palace denied the story, dismissing the idea of a rift between him and the Queen. Prince Philip also addressed the rumors, sarcastically asking if anyone had ever seen him go anywhere without a police escort accompanying him, implying such affairs would have been impossible. However, royal biographer Sarah Bradford had a different view. In her biography of Elizabeth, she claimed that since the alleged affair in the mid-1950s, Philip had learned to be more discreet, conducting his flirtatiousness in elite circles, grand enough to protect him from the paparazzi and the tabloids. Despite all the rumors and speculations, no infidelity was ever confirmed. Instead, what has been consistently evident was Philip's devotion to Queen Elizabeth. During their 50th wedding anniversary, Queen Elizabeth described him as her strength and stay throughout the years.
A fitting start to the celebrations. On the eve of their golden wedding anniversary, the Queen and Prince Philip attended a banquet hosted by London's Lord Mayor.
Someone to whom they owed more than they would ever claim, or they shall ever know. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went on to celebrate their diamond and platinum anniversary, with Elizabeth always expressing gratitude for his unwavering support and love. But in 2017, something happened that led to a major change in their relationship. After over 70 years of marriage, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip decided to live apart. What could have led to this decision? Keep watching to find out. Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth separated. In May 2017, Prince Philip announced his retirement from public life.
Finally tonight, Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip, officially retires. It comes after 7 decades in the public eye.
However, he didn't retire until August 2nd, 2017, after attending his final royal engagement with the Royal Marines at age 96. Buckingham Palace released a statement that the Duke of Edinburgh would no longer undertake his public engagement, though he may choose to attend certain events alongside the Queen. But this rarely happened, as Prince Philip was involved with something else. After his retirement, he moved from Buckingham Palace to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, a place known as the former home of Prince John, the epileptic youngest son of George V and Queen Mary, who lived there in quiet seclusion with his devoted nurse, Lullabill, until he died at age 13 in 1919. But why did Prince Philip choose to live here? In a 2011 interview, Prince Philip, then 90, stated that he wanted to enjoy himself. Though he didn't retire until he was 96, this decision had the full approval of the Queen, who knew how supportive Philip had been, and that he wanted to have time for himself. However, when Philip arrived at Sandringham, he was horrified to see a busload of cooks, telephonists, and other staff awaiting Jim, despite his desire for a simple visit. Regardless, Prince Philip made sure his stay was fun. In the privacy of Sandringham, he enjoyed his freedom to go carriage driving. This was a new hobby he took up as he could no longer play polo due to arthritis in his wrists. Carriage driving became a form of relaxation, though he later had to stop as he could no longer control the horses. He also enjoyed painting watercolors and reading, preferring history to novels, and also discussing with a friend. Philip also enjoyed driving, but in January 2019, he had to stop as he was involved in a car accident when he drove onto a main road near the Sandringham.
Queen Elizabeth's 97-year-old husband, Prince Philip, is said to be doing fine this morning after a car crash where he was at the wheel. His SUV flipped, but he walked away without serious injury.
While he was uninjured, the driver and the passenger in the other car were injured. Philip apologized, and 3 weeks later he voluntarily surrendered his driving license.
The Duke of Edinburgh no longer in the driver's seat. Buckingham Palace today confirming the 97-year-old decided to voluntarily surrender his license.
However, he was still allowed to drive around private estates and was seen behind the wheel of Windsor Castle in April 2019. However, what was meant to be a short visit to Wood Farm turned into a longer visit. Philip didn't return to the palace. This was because he knew he would still try to be involved with royal life, despite his retirement. Instead, he embraced the peaceful life at Wood Farm Cottage. But this arrangement meant he and the Queen would spend long periods apart. However, they spoke daily on the phone, sharing how their day went, and the Queen and other members also visited Wood Farm to spend time with him. However, despite Prince Philip's retreat from public life, he attended important occasions, including the 2018 royal wedding of Prince Harry, Princess Eugenie, Lady Gabriella Windsor, and Princess Beatrice. But as time passed, he began to lose his longtime friends, one of the burdens of living a long life. Within a year, Philip lost 3 of his friends, and more people he had known passed away, including his valet of 40 years. However, Prince Philip remained remarkably fit and agile for his age, although his short-term memory began to fail him as he was approaching 100 years. While everyone was excited, Philip wasn't excited about his coming birthday. He disliked the fuss and attention. Philip also traveled around. He was usually at Windsor during the Easter court and on weekends at Broadlands with Queen Elizabeth. He enjoyed Balmoral less in his later years, cutting his visits short in 2019 and 2020, and returning to Wood Farm. In 2020, the Queen accompanied him to Sandringham, where Prince Charles came over to see them, a reversal of roles. However, their visit was usually short, as the Queen had to return to attend to state matters. However, something unexpected happened that brought Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip to live together. COVID-19. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown was announced in March 2020. Prince Philip joined Queen Elizabeth at Windsor, entering what was jokingly called HMS Bubble. They stayed in touch with family by Zoom, and on July 22nd, Philip made a memorable final public appearance, stepping into the quadrangle in Windsor Castle to hand over his post as Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles to the Duchess of Cornwall. This was the last time he appeared before the camera. In January 2021, Philip and Elizabeth were vaccinated against COVID-19 by a household doctor at Windsor Castle. However, in February 2022, He was admitted to King Edward VII Hospital as a precautionary measure after feeling unwell. Though he walked in unaided, the public worried about his well-being. Buckingham Palace confirmed that he was responding to treatment for an infection, and he later had a successful heart procedure before being discharged. Upon returning home, the talks on his forthcoming 100th birthday took center stage, but Philip wasn't looking forward to 100. Perhaps because he knew he wouldn't reach it. 3 weeks later, on the morning of the 9th of April, 2021, Prince Philip died at the age of 99, with Queen Elizabeth by his bedside. The palace described his passing as a peaceful death, and the Queen later admitted that he had left a huge void in her life. Prince Philip was buried on 17th April 2021 at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, temporarily interred alongside 25 other coffins, including that of George III. However, his last will wasn't read, but it was to be sealed for at least 90 years to protect the Queen's dignity and standing, as there are speculations that it might contain material harmful to the reputation of the royal family. Reflecting on Prince Philip's legacy, Princess Anne described him as her teacher, supporter, and critic. She expressed a deep admiration for him and aspired to emulate his example of a life well lived and service freely given. His ability to treat every person as an individual in their own right with their skills was a defining trait throughout his life. She also acknowledged the vital role he played in supporting Queen Elizabeth to ascend to the throne at such a young age. His unwavering support helped her to rule with confidence. Prince Charles also paid tribute to his father. He said his father had given the last 70 years of remarkable devotion to the Queen, the royal family, the country, and also the whole of the Commonwealth. He admired his father's dedication and astonishing energy in supporting his mother throughout his life. Prince Andrew, recalling family moments, spoke of Prince Philip as a father who cherished his time with his family. About a year after Prince Philip's death, Queen Elizabeth spoke of her late husband, saying, "I have spoken before of my deep and abiding affection for this wonderful country, and of the many happy memories Prince Philip and I always held of our time here. It is often said that it is the people that make a place, and there are few places where this is truer than in Scotland, as we have seen in recent times." Her words reflected the deep bond she and Philip had with Scotland, and how much she missed him. Although Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth spent their final years living apart, he lived a remarkable life, and his unwavering support for his wife was extraordinary. A year after his passing, on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. She was laid to rest beside her beloved husband at King George VI Memorial Chapel. Even in death, they remained together. What do you think of Prince Philip's decision to live away from Queen Elizabeth in the later years of his life? Do you think he had a hidden motive other than what was revealed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.